I must have been tinkering with some ransomware. I had a NAS on my network, but I thought it was safely tucked away in my business VLAN. I opened it up and there was a ransom note in the public part of that share. And I thought, oh my gosh, I immediately assumed that it gotten the entire NAS. And so I started poking around quick and realized, nope, but those, luckily all of the rest of the folders were behind authorization. It was then that I realized, in going back and figuring out what the heck happened, and that I had implemented my VLANs, but I never put any firewalls. I just thought, hey, I've got VLANs. That should segment my traffic. And no, it absolutely does not. So, there's just so much to learn in the industry.
Welcome to Blue Team Diaries, the podcast that celebrates and honors the professionals who work tirelessly to defend their organizations and those who build tools to support defenders. In each episode, host Peter Manev invites his guests to share their stories and experiences in a fun and lighthearted conversation. Blue Team Diaries is sponsored by Stamus Networks, a global provider of network-based threat detection and response solutions. Learn more at stamus-networks.com.
Let me introduce you to Dr. Josh Stroschein. Josh is an experienced malware analyst and reverse engineer and has a passion for sharing his knowledge with others. He's a reverse engineer with the Flare team at Google, where he focuses on tackling the latest threats. Josh is an accomplished trainer, providing training at places such as Ring Zero, Black Hat, DEF CON, TorCon, Hack in the Box, Suricon, and other public and private venues. Josh is also an author on Pluralsight, where he publishes content around malware analysis, reverse engineering, and other security-related topics. Hey Josh, welcome. Can you share a cool project you've been working on recently?
Yes, I have quite a few, although the projects and my interests,
I'll
I
have
suppose,
them all, by the way, I'm just saying.
Yeah, they span a kind of a wide variety of different facets, I guess, of my life. Content creation is an area that I spend a great deal of time. So I've been working on a number of projects for new courses on places like Pluralsight. And one of the areas that I find myself now professionally with my day job, my primary focus is doing both virtual and in-person training. So I'm kind of back into this world of taking experience from performing malware analysis, reverse engineering, and applying it back kind of externally to the different customers and clients that we have. Some other projects then that are work related, I don't have, maybe can't share real in-depth specifics, but certainly can talk about them at a high level. As you might imagine, at working at Google now, there is mountains and mountains of data. It's in fact quite overwhelming how much data is present, and that's not a surprise at all. I think what is surprising to me is my ability to access said data, and then the challenges that have come with trying to make sense of it. How do you query it effectively, and start to pull out operational or impactful meaning from that data. And so there's some teams that I've been involved with at Google where that's become a bigger part of my daily job than I was expecting. I joined Google about a year and a half ago to do reverse engineering, and I didn't know where that would take me. Maybe it wasn't even real clearly defined in my mind at that point in time, but I was expecting to spend my days in and out of IDA Pro and kind of slugging away with the hex editors. And so when I found some opportunity to try to help be a part of the scaling of our detection and the automation of some of our reverse engineering tasks, try to help with reducing the toil of reversing, that was really great. And then opportunities also that could then reflect back to help impact customers. So I know that's probably all sounds very vague, but it has been very interesting for me, especially someone who doesn't have really a data science background at all, to see not only the impact that it really is having at such a place like Google, but then also the scale.
No, it's all very interesting, actually. Out of curiosity, I mean, that's every probably malware researcher's dream or reverse engineer's dream, right? An abundance of actually data that they can go through and things like that. So is it possible for you to give me a scale? Like you click search and it goes through what, 1 gazillion petabytes in 0.5 seconds? What does it happen? What happens?
Yeah, when you actually feel the rotation of the Earth slow down a little bit, that's because of a really poor query that I wrote, and all of the Google data centers across the globe are spinning up. Extra CPUs, GPUs, the generators are kicking on, and they're saying, "Whoa! What's this person doing? This is a terrible query." So I've had a lot of help. Something that also has been just an incredible opportunity is how helpful everybody that I've been able to interact with, not only on the teams that I've been a part of, but just across Google. It doesn't take much to for example, take a rough query like that and say, I'm not so sure about this. Find someone to help me turn it into magic, and then the significance or the performance goes up quite considerably. I don't know about the actual amount of data. I'm afraid to even query simple things like that to say, give me a row count from this table. But it's lots. It's a scale that I've, before I got into cybersecurity, I was working as a software engineer. So, in the area, in the region, one of my first jobs out of college was with a credit card processing company. And I thought we were dealing with a lot of data because we were servicing a lot of regional banks and their daily volume of transactions for credit and debit, and it was interesting. And that's like a drop in the bucket, a drop in the ocean compared to what's available. And I'm not saying I have access to everything. I certainly don't. But there is a sense of freedom in justifying what data you're after, and then being able to say, okay, here's this mountain of information. Go ahead and try to mold something useful out of it. Yeah.
Very cool. So you take that query and you ask your coders, like, how can we optimize this, and just wildcard it at the back, right? You want most results, right?
yeah. Lots of subqueries, lots of regular expressions, lots of joins.
That's super.
It's been good, because I haven't spent a lot of time writing queries in quite a while now. As I mentioned, I was kind of expecting a lot of time at IDA, which I'm actually back to. I've changed teams over the course of the last year and a half. Google acquired Mandiant a little over a year ago. That brought with a bunch of really awesome reverse engineers. And because I was on a team where there was only 2 of us, it seemed to make sense to have some consolidation there. So I find myself now with the Flare team. So I am back to working more daily with IDA and the training and stuff. But initially, I was with the Chronicle team, and Chronicle is I guess I don't know how I would describe it, a sim-like project that just allows for data aggregation and then your ability to search through that data at Google scale.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So actually, I reserve myself the right. So if I need the query improved, I'll pop you an email or something without thinking about it. So apologizing in advance, but I'm totally doing that.
Yeah.
So actually, out of curiosity, in your line of work, can you share with us like an oh crap or a close call moment where you were nearly breached, but you or your team avoided disaster and similar things? Can you share something with us if that's all right?
I don't. I'd say I kind of have a different take on this because the teams that I'm a part of, between Flare and Chronicle, because with Flare, a lot of the workflow is coming from companies that have been breached, but that's typically on the incident responders and those analysts to deal with. So not really, I'm not really a part of the active defense of any organization. And even with my time at Chronicle, that wasn't really our role. We weren't directly supporting any customers in that sense. As an educator, though, and as a trainer, and then just someone who likes to tinker with malware and has done so now for quite a few years, that's where I've had my oh crap moment. And it was, I don't remember when it was. It wasn't that long ago. Well, I should say it's been a few years now. But I kind of stumbled into malware analysis I went to begin teaching at a university 11, 12 years ago. And I knew I wanted to teach cybersecurity, but I really didn't know what exactly that meant. Looking back, I really didn't know what exactly that meant.
Right.
Having had a development background, although high level, I did a lot of .NET, I did a lot of web app stuff, some mobile. I really didn't know what it meant, and that seemed like with that background, that malware and some of the reverse engineering just really had a draw on me. As I got further into it, I realized that it was definitely a niche area, not only in academia, but then kind of across all different industry sectors. And I liked it, and it just seemed like a great place to carve out, a career, at least for the time being. So with that, I kind of was finding myself in these positions where I was creating content and teaching it, but I'd never really done it professionally. I eventually remedied that. I started working for some companies like Bromium that got acquired by HP and all of that. I don't want to bore you with all the details of my career, but I guess the gist of it is that as I started handling more malware, of course, the need to build a malware analysis lab environment kind of goes hand in hand. And so at one point, I was pretty paranoid. I would have systems that were dedicated, not connected to the internet. So I'd download something, put it on a thumb drive, shuffle it over. And I'm like, okay, I'm too lazy to do this every time. So I slowly started to build up my lab environment. I got to a point where I finally bought some dedicated networking hardware to create VLANs and move my malware stuff onto its own VLAN with dedicated systems. So that way, if something goes wrong, I can just wipe everything and start over. I'm not a networking person though, and at least not in terms of infrastructure and actually configuring firewalls and setting up different VLANs. And so what I had found one day, this is a long story, but what I had found one day, I must have been tinkering with some ransomware. I had a NAS on my network, but I thought it was safely tucked away in my business VLAN. I opened it up and there was a ransom note in the public part of that share. And I thought, oh my gosh, I immediately assumed that it had gotten the entire NAS. And so I started poking around quick and realized, nope, but luckily all of the rest of the folders were behind authorization. It was then that I realized, in going back and figuring out what the heck happened, and that I had implemented my VLANs, but I never put any firewalls. I just thought, hey, I've got VLANs. That should segment my traffic. And no, it absolutely does not. So, there's just so much to learn in the industry. It's hard to be an expert at everything. I certainly don't pretend to be, and that was kind of a scary moment. And since then, I kind of doubled down my focus on making sure that I did in fact have my layers correct. I did have my networking correct, and everything in between. How I use my VMs, how I snapshot things, what I let connect out to the internet, when I let it connect out to the internet, and tried to really tighten things up. So I guess if you take anything away from that, if you're handling malware, do be careful, because ransomware is destructive, and there is plenty of destructive stuff out there that, I would have been devastated, because pictures and all sorts of things would have potentially been destroyed.
So did you actually go through a process of like traditional digital forensic incident response, kind of, just to confirm that nothing else is affected and all that?
To the ability that I could, I didn't have network logs or anything on that particular system, or on that network, or even on my network now. I don't run anything like that anymore. Just, I guess, the hassle or the time that it requires to keep up with it. I would take a look at all the systems that I could. A lot of Macs in my network, so I think there's sort of I don't want to say security through obscurity, but something that I was most likely looking at in a Windows VM. I feel a little more comfortable saying it probably didn't know how to handle those systems. So no, I mean, I did check the best I could. I kind of monitored stuff for a while just to see if I was picking up any strange network activity or connections.
So
a little bit harder on the host, but
right. Out of curiosity, can you share the name of the ransomware? Do you know what it was, or no idea?
No, I don't even remember.
Okay.
What were some of the really popular ones initially?
Right.
The name is
WannaCry and things like that? Or?
Yeah, I think around that time frame, maybe even a little bit before.
Yeah, all right.
I can't remember. The name is like right there, but I just can't quite grasp it.
Something with crab? No.
Yeah. No. Once I find it, it'll be like, right. Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Right.
But I just can't.
Sure.
I just can't think of it. So it's been a few years. That's probably the moment that I've had the biggest panic, and that kind of extends into even like certainly today and what I do anytime I'm handling malware. Before I joined Google, I was just using my own systems. Now that I'm with Google, I have to handle some of this stuff on corporate assets, and so my workflow is different, and that always just makes me a little more paranoid. And I've had a few moments where I'm like, oh crap, what happened? Did I accidentally move that to the wrong system? But
right.
yeah, it's
So
nothing.
it can
it's
give you a
nothing
few
like,
wrinkles, I suppose, right?
What's that?
It can give you a few wrinkles, I guess.
I suppose, yeah. Yeah.
Right. Well, I've actually had the pleasure of sitting through a good few of your classes, or also as well some webinars and similar things, reverse engineering, all that. And I've watched some of the ones that are on YouTube, of course, public done by you. And I know that you have a good few favorite tools and all that, and I've seen you doing some kind of voodoo stuff, voodoo magic with them. So my question is, what is like your go-to tool that you can't live without? Now, what's the one tool that is like, okay, that's it for me. That's the one.
Yeah, considering the content I produce and what I do, for the most part on a daily basis, I'd say IDA Pro is that go-to, where I think if it were to disappear due to, let's say, budgeting concerns or the licensing costs, or it just, they just stop releasing it, I suppose, that would be a tough one. Yeah, there's alternatives out there for sure, but it's the one that I've used for so long. I'm the most comfortable and familiar with it. I still have plenty I can learn, but it's just I use it and like it the most. Outside of that, I think like a lot of professionals, it just really depends on the context. There's just so many great tools out there. I've pondered this more recently than I have, I suppose, in the past, and that is just how much outside of IDA, IDA's commercial costs money. There's nothing we can do about that. You can look for alternatives like Ghidra, but so you kind of like, but everything else is there's so much dependency on either open source projects, open source tools, things that are just released under open licenses. So much of my daily workflow is so dependent upon that, that it's quite amazing. And so I would say, to give a non-answer, outside of IDA, just the whole world of open source is so, and not just open source, but just the open and the tools that are freely available. It's just so important, all of them. It's hard to pick just one because it all depends, but on what you're analyzing. But there's just such a great,
the interactions, the communications. Yeah, there's a bunch of sandboxes, all those things in there. A bunch of, hey, let's not forget the open directories. That's also
well, and the sandboxes are definitely another great resource. There's, I suppose, there's a lot of organizations, internal resources that are helpful. But when I'm doing my own like personal research, public facing sandboxes and those that have a free tier, abuse.ch is a great project. I use it all the time, not only as a place that I try to contribute myself through some of my own open directory crawling, but then as a platform to research, to look up samples, to get some of the classification and tagging and maybe a little bit of the relationship. Right. That's another, I find, just a really helpful project for my personal research, and certainly before I joined Google. And the reason I like it is kind of in that same spirit of open source. It's an open community. It's an open platform. You can create an account. You can get an API key, and the sky's the limit. In fact, if you upload too many things that aren't really malicious, the author might reach out to you and say, "Hey, what are you doing?
You say like, up your game.
Can you confirm before you?" Yeah. No, it's great. Cool. It's a great project, and I believe it's only one person that runs it, and they're doing amazing work. I don't know how they keep up with it.
I agree too. I think it's pretty awesome, actually, without exaggeration. Which reminds me, I think, I know, you actually have an open source tool on GitHub somewhere that was actually doing a lot, can do a lot of stuff around open directories and things like that. Do you mind telling us, just giving a highlight overview here for that tool? How is it useful?
Yeah. So you mentioned, I think you asked at the beginning here of our conversation about some projects, and that's another bucket of projects that I have, a number of repositories on GitHub. Just part of what I am hoping can be my contribution back to the community. Subcrawl, it's called Subcrawl. Not great at naming, but it's stuck. And the idea came to me, I don't know, a few years ago, when I was, again, kind of pre-Google time, and I'm sitting in academia and I'm trying to figure out, how does everybody do it? How do they find all of this malware? How do they find toolkits? How do they find panels and the source code for panels? And one I don't even remember now exactly where, probably InfoSec Twitter at the time is probably where I started to look for more public facing information, and started noticing these open DIRs or open directories. And so I just started looking into them, and the more I looked into them, the more interesting things I found and interesting ways to classify. At the time, I was working with the team at HP. We'd gotten acquired. I guess Bromium was the company, got acquired by HP. And I, fortunately, I don't know, but I always sat on the outside kind of as a contractor for many years. But it was probably my first real gig in cyber as I was teaching. I did an actual internship one summer, and it was pretty fun.
Very well done.
So I brought it to one of my colleagues. I said, hey, I got this idea, and I just gave some examples of why I think this is interesting. And we started brainstorming, and next thing I know, he really took off. I was doing a lot of this in my quote unquote free time, which I think I'm a lot like you, in that I think I have this never ending pool of time or multiple clones of myself. And I commit to all these things, and I'm always like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And then I'm like, oh crap, maybe I'll do that in 3 months when I have time. And then even 3 months from now, the time never comes. So we did eventually work on it together. He did a lot of work. Patrick is his name. He's on the GitHub. You'll see. Check it out. And I think came up with a really nice framework. We wanted something that was modular, so you could feed it, of course, input, that is where to go scrape, and then to do something with to do something while you're scraping, identify those interesting things. So you have these processing modules that allow you to apply Yara, and in fact, I just released one today, a new processing module. So thank you for asking.
Congrats.
And it just, all it does is as it collects payloads, I'm just calling that HTTP responsive payload. So if it identifies something interesting, like a document or a PE file, a lot of PE files, not only will then it, of course, classify that, but it will search that hash from that PE file on abuse.ch, so the malware bazaar, to see if it's there, and the URL on the URL house. And then if it is, it pulls back the tag and tells you, oh yeah, this has already been reported. It's malware family X. If it's not, you can submit it. So a lot of how I submit to the malware bazaar is just through that module.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then the data comes out. Of course, you want to store it. So I store, there's a couple of output modules. You can just spit content to the console. You can add content to Elastic. You can add content to a MISP instance. I personally use Elastic, and then I can look back in time through the scraping. Because, I'll find things like panels and other stuff in my scrape data that gets recorded. And so that can be helpful to go back through. But the main idea and the main motivation was, I first was finding a lot of archive zips of tools, and then it kind of expanded into payloads and other interesting use cases. Web shells, I was able to track, and I still can, I suppose. I just haven't been doing it, but able to track web shells to some degree, to some degree of accuracy.
Actually, interesting you mentioned that. Out of curiosity, what's your view on, do you think, from your experience anyway, do you think kind of there's a slowdown for malware going through clear text, for example, or there is a kind of a more shift towards encryption? The reason why I'm asking is, I give you my back, at least what I've heard, what I've seen. Clear text is more likely to go through all defenses, to be very honest, if it's like XORed or something, things like that. So it has a higher chance because it's not as vetted as, let's say, encrypted. Is that true? Is that assumption? Is that just wrong. What do you think?
Yeah. I've also been thinking about this a lot lately as well, and that is, my perceptions of things. And it's so easy for me to say, well, I want to build this perception based off of what the data I'm seeing, whether that's with my day job or if it's through places like Malware Bazaar, or and that can become so limited when you really look at the full context of stuff. My perception is going to be limited if I'm limiting myself to Malware Bazaar. Because they're probably just dealing with the stuff that is more of that bulk kind of volume commodity. What about all the APTs?
There's different, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I don't know, I guess. This is a long way of saying I don't know. I certainly see when I go digging into something, a lot of just plain old HTTP traffic yet, no TLS. And I suspect for reasons like you defined that there's maybe less scrutiny. If the data needs to be protected, it's really easy at that layer to just throw an XOR, a single byte XOR key, or encrypt it.
Sure. You can still do it without encryption.
Yeah. I mean, Emotet when it was in its when it was running full steam, they were encrypt. It was non-encrypted sessions, plain old HTTP, but then they were encrypting the payload. The response going back and forth, and that's to me just as effective. Without the overhead of dealing with certs. But so I would suspect it's there. I do hear people say often enough that all malware is moving to TLS, and I guess I'm not quite sure I understand that, because I would say no. There's still plenty of it out there that is not using TLS. But maybe if you were to further refine that and say, well, just the top tier threat actors, the nation states, maybe red teams are. I don't know.
I mean, yes, of course, I totally agree with you. There's different. That was a very generic, actually, question for me to put it. But there's different levels of actors, right? Some, you have the APTs and all that can actually take a campaign or take like months or years, take their sweet time and do a really dedicated effort. So that will be a different experience. And then you have the bulk one that you say that is just spray and forget type of thing. If it happens, it happens. Sure.
I guess maybe it's just that part of moving through life in a linear fashion. That the older you get, the more you realize you don't know, and so you become more aware.
I do that on a daily basis.
Yeah, I do as well.
Well, actually, it's one of the reasons why this industry, to me personally, why this industry is so interesting, because actually there's always something to, and especially there's something to learn from your younger colleagues, let's say, newer colleagues and things like that. So there's always something happens. So it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, in fact, there's I use malware as training aids, and I have for years, and there'll be samples that I'll use in a lab for 6-7 years, and I'll learn something new about it every time I give that lab in a training. So
like, oh, how did I not notice that before?
Yeah, I know, exactly. How did I miss that?
Right. Sure. Well, all right. Some cool stories about open source tools, projects, aha moments. If you have one piece of advice to give someone thinking about becoming a cyber defender, what would it be? What would be your, like, this is the thing you need to do?
Yeah, I thought about that a lot as well. I think probably the biggest advice, and this is going to maybe come across a little generic, but just being patient with yourself when you're getting into the field, especially when you don't know where you're going to land. I think you see cybersecurity in terms of career advertised as this monolithic thing. You just go to the school and get into cybersecurity, or go pursue the certification and get into cybersecurity. But as we've already discussed, there's so many different avenues of it, and some of the areas you can find yourself, like reverse engineering. I mean, you can go and maybe start at a broad spectrum, but even within cyber, the number of folks that are doing RE is already a very limited and
Right.
kind of small scope. And then from there, you can go and further, like nuance yourself and say, I just really want to get good at a particular architecture, typical operating system, particular file format, whatever the case may be. And so it can take folks a while to figure out where their path lies. I used to teach reverse engineering courses in college, and today I still teach a lot of RE stuff in different venues. And some participants or students will get in and they'll get really frustrated with it. And I just say, hey, you know what? I hated RE when I first started because I was so overwhelmed, and it made me feel at times kind of stupid. And I had to be patient with myself and patient with my ability to find the knowledge I needed, because it can be very fragmented even to this day. In fact, that's what motivates me for a lot of the content I create, is to try to pull some of that information and that knowledge out of the dark corners of the field and make it a little bit more easy to consume. And you may get to the end of that and realize, no, I don't want to be an RE, or I don't want to be a pen tester, but it's okay to have false starts, and it can take a while. I don't think there's a right or wrong path to getting into.
But there's a learning curve, for sure.
But there is a learning curve. Not only that, where do you want your time to be spent, but how long is it going to take you to get there? I tend to focus on the technical just because that's where my mind lives. That's where my day-to-day is. There's a ton of career opportunities that touch on the technical but don't involve fiddling with bits and bytes on a daily basis. The governance, the risk, the policy. I've even found time in over the course of the years, just consulting companies saying, hey, you don't have a big budget, you don't have maybe you don't even have dedicated technology team. You really should be thinking about these things, and these are some high level stuff that I can help you with, laying out the big picture, but not like, I can't help you build a secure network. I can tell you the pieces that you need, but you're going to have to find someone like you or Stamus to really come in here and architect it out. So all kinds of opportunities, and it may not lead into cyber either. I've had many students over the years. In fact, I just talked to one today because I ran across an old blog that he wrote while he was in school, and he's like, hey, I've gotten into sat communications and satellite stuff, and it's really cool. I haven't really been doing the cyber stuff, but it's technology, and there's kind of a fundamental layer that just, whether you want to break networks or build networks, just certain things you have to know. So
sure. I guess it's also up to the person as well. They might find out, as you say, that it's not something they really like. They might want to do something else. But is there anything that you thought is like scarier than it actually is, which could be stopping people from pursuing a career in cybersecurity?
Reverse engineering. That's why I started doing it, because it just intimidated me. And I thought,
so that was your trigger. That was a trigger point there for you.
It really was. I think my memory gets a little fuzzy. So sometimes I worry that I can look back in time and I can paint this rosy picture. But what really motivated me initially was I just wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And it was very intimidating, because there was, that's like the culmination of being able to reverse engineer, even just at a pragmatic level. It's like a buildup of so many different things, technologies and computer science fundamentals, and how the operating system works, and file formats, and hexadecimal versus binary, and two's complement, and the list goes on and on and on. And so there's a fairly steep learning curve to get there. And then you put on top of that the fact that there's not a ton of people. There's more red teamers than there are reverse engineers. And you could maybe argue that there's some overlap there, and there certainly is. But that the information is a little harder to get. There are more courses on RE now than there were 10, 12, 13, 14 years ago. And of course, 13 years ago, there was more content than there was 13 years before that. I found it to be just really daunting. But then I liked the challenge, and then the more I got into it, and the more I started to finally connect all the dots, I kind of had one of those days where it was just like, oh, I kind of get it. and there's still, again, I don't want to ever mislead. There is a ton I don't know. I learn more every day. That's part of what I like about it. I forget a lot too, and have to relearn it, and that's a bit frustrating, but it's always easier to learn the third, the fourth, the fifth time. But I also like that about it, is that just there's there's always a
And
new
there's
challenge.
so much of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so
Awesome.
far, Bard and ChatGPT aren't killing it on the RE scene. So I'm sure that will change. But
Oh, is that not possible? Is it not possible just to drop it in and they'll reverse it for you?
There's typically, when you're dealing with malicious stuff, there's always layers upon layers of obfuscation. And so I think that's still a bit of a challenge. If you had some clear-cut assembly code or something, or C, you could get a great summary from ChatGPT or Bard.
All right. Okay. Okay. Cool.
So yeah, I would say RE definitely, and computer science and programming. I mean, there's just a lot of it. The technology, it takes a while to build up. I must admit,
now you turn on my curiosity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I was curious before too, but now, who knows? Might be a trigger point for me too.
Yeah.
The way you say it, yeah.
Well, and as we talked about earlier too, I didn't anticipate it. I knew it would serve me well while I was teaching. I didn't know. I really didn't have the full. I didn't set out and say someday I want to be an RE for Flare, the Flare team. I thought that was, even just working for Google, I thought that was so far out of my reach that I never even really thought of it or considered it. I never would have considered trying to get a job at Google as a developer. I just never figured I'd make the cut. And yet here I am. So I guess that's another thing. Just in that realm of career advice, don't ever sell yourself short.
Right, excellent. That's very good advice. Thank you. Josh, final question. Would you like to give a shout out to any mentors, anybody that helped you out?
Yeah. These are tough questions because I could probably go on for 20 minutes and then feel bad that I still forgot folks. But usually the first person that comes to mind is Jared DeMott. Jared was, not the first person that got me into cyber, but when I started a PhD program at the university I was at, he was teaching in it. And he just opened a lot of doors for me. He is the reason I ended up at Bromium. He's the reason I started doing some of my first conference trainings, which scared the heck out of me, because he's like, "Hey, I got this hacker course. Do you want to go and teach it for me?" And I'm like, "Well, of course I do." So he just gave me his material and said, "Okay, here's the place and the date and the time. Good luck." And so that was big learning, and a big adventure. And so he's been really instrumental, and then just tons of folks along the way. It's too hard to really articulate everyone, but folks like you, Peter, that I've gotten to know really well over the last, what's it been now, 4 years ish. We can have these engaging conversations. We can have opportunities to just spitball ideas. Sometimes when I just need a vent, it's just been a true blessing in my life. And so and that goes to organizations as well. OASF as a foundation, my time there was just really, really impactful for me, and as a member of that group and that community, and just seeing how functioning teams can operate, how they can engage with their communities, and hopefully treat everyone well with respect. And so it's been good. But those, if I have to narrow it down to not talk all through the podcast.
No problem. No problem. Much appreciated, ladies and gentlemen. Josh Stroschein, Dr. Josh Stroschein, a blue teamer, a person that I learned from a lot. And Josh, keep doing what you're doing. You're an inspiration to other blue teamers, I guarantee. Thank you very much for being with us.
Yes, thank you, Peter. You as well. I appreciate the time and the invitation to be with you today.
Thank you for celebrating and honoring the defenders with Blue Team Diaries. You can find this and all our previous episodes on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you're interested in learning more about our sponsor, Stamus Networks, please visit stamus-networks.com.